When an empath wonders why they seem to be a magnet for narcissists, the truth is never on the surface. It does not lie in the gentleness you offer, the light you radiate, or the kindness everyone sees. Those are only the visible parts of the iceberg. In the depth of Jungian psychology, every human being enters life not only with light, but with a shadow, the unconscious part containing wounds, fears, repressed emotions, and unnamed longings. And it is that shadow, not the light, that becomes the primal force pulling disordered souls toward you. Empaths often believe they are chosen because of their understanding, compassion, and ability to heal. But the deeper truth is different. The narcissist is drawn to the parts you try to hide, the memories of every abandonment you endured, the pain you never dared to name, the tender places you conceal behind a calm smile. They instantly recognize something you yourself have not fully realized. You learn to love through pain, and you learn to endure in order to protect others before ever protecting yourself. In the eyes of a narcissist, your shadow shines in a strange way. It signals that you will try, you will understand, you will tolerate, you will forgive, and most importantly, you will not abandon them no matter what they do. This is not a flaw. It is the result of a childhood in which you had to become the emotional stabilizer for others. A childhood where you learned to read the shifting look in someone's eyes, to stay silent, to keep the peace, to love through sacrifice. And these survival mechanisms create an energetic frequency that immature souls, especially narcissists, pick up instantly without a single word. You are emotional supply, a safe haven, a reflective mirror, a balm for their inner chaos. They are not drawn to the polished light you show the world. They are drawn to the shadow that once learned to endure in order to survive. The irony is that empaths often think they were chosen because they are good. But in Jung's truth, the shadow is the center of all interactions. When an empath meets a narcissist, it is not the coincidence of fate. It is the collision of two unconscious systems. One carries the fear of abandonment, the other carries the panic of inner emptiness. One seeks harmony, the other seeks control. All of this happens in silence, long before either of you speaks the first word. The narcissist senses in you a space they can step into and occupy. You sense in them a pain you unconsciously want to heal. And that is how the dance begins, not between two hearts, but between two shadows. Only when you dare to look at your own darkness with honesty, without denial, without running, do you see the truth. You do not attract narcissists because you are weak, but because you are deep. Not because you are lacking, but because you were wounded in a way that opened an unconscious doorway in your energy field. And when you learn to integrate your own light and shadow, when you no longer let old wounds define your worth, when you no longer seek connection through endurance, that frequency disappears. You no longer emit an unconscious invitation to souls who survive on chaos. Because in the end, as Jung said, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. And the moment you look directly into your shadow is the moment you stop attracting the shadows of others. Part 1. The Empath's Darkness. The true nature Jung called the wounded shadow. To understand why the darkness of an empath is strangely irresistible to narcissists, we must look back at the real origin of the shadow an empath carries. Jung once said that every person grows up not only with wounds, but with a soul defense mechanism formed directly from those wounds. For empaths, darkness is not hidden cruelty or buried selfishness. Their darkness is the fear of loving the wrong person, the belief that they must be useful to be loved, the memory of trying to maintain peace in a household full of conflict. That darkness is soft, not sharp. It is made of silence, observation, gentleness, and all the times they made themselves smaller just to avoid causing more trouble. And it is precisely those compressed parts that generate a kind of energy others can feel even before the empath speaks. The empath's darkness is a unique magnetic field. It does not repel, it invites. It says, I understand pain. I will not hurt you. I will not abandon you the way others have. This is why even the most disordered souls feel safe approaching an empath. Yet the paradox is this: empaths rarely realize they are emitting such a signal. They believe they are simply living kindly, listening well, being understanding. But on the unconscious level, their shadow specifically, the need to connect through sacrifice becomes a survival beacon for those who are constantly searching for emotional compensation. Jung called these soft, vulnerable parts the wounded shadow, the shadow of someone who has been hurt so deeply that the pain becomes part of their personality. And this is exactly where the narcissist recognizes the empath instantly. Narcissists are not attracted to healed strength. They are attracted to the subtle vulnerability they know they can exploit. They see in the empath a soul that is not fully closed, an unconscious doorway left open, a space they can easily merge into. The presence of an empath makes them feel understood, seen, soothed experiences they lacked since childhood. And because they cannot heal themselves from within, they seek out souls who radiate a kind of darkness that is easy to manipulate. The empath's shadow unconsciously says, I have been hurt, so I will not hurt you. But to a narcissist, that signal sounds like, I can endure your pain, even the pain you unload onto me. This is why empaths and narcissists rarely meet in the light, they meet in the shadow. The part neither side is proud of, the part no one wants to face, yet the part that connects the strongest. Therefore, unless the empath understands the architecture of their own darkness, they will never realize that what they call kindness is actually broadcasting an unconscious invitation, attracting those who are emotionally weak yet control driven. Part 2: How the narcissist recognizes the empath's shadow from the first encounter. From the very first moment, the narcissist does not see your light, they see your shadow, the part you yourself try to hide. They sense it with an unconscious radar, the way predators detect an injured creature even when it is still standing tall. Narcissists possess an extremely sharp shadow radar. They scan for souls radiating soft energy, easy to empathize, easy to yield, easy to take on emotional responsibility. And they recognize this in an empath long before the empath speaks a single word. This is not mystical. It is a psychological mechanism born from their own childhood deprivation. Their survival instinct forces them to develop rapid emotional scanning, not to connect, but to measure how much control they can have. When they stand before an empath, they immediately sense emotional layers: gentleness on the surface, fragility underneath, and a deep wound the empath never speaks of. This combination produces an unconscious signal the narcissist cannot resist. What they notice first is not your beauty, intelligence, or kindness, but the familiar energy of a child who once had to regulate the emotions of adults. They see it in your attentive eyes, your soft tone, the delicate way you observe, your caution in approaching others, and especially how you respond to their pain, even when that pain is staged. Empaths react with understanding almost instantly, and narcissists perceive this the way an emotional addict smells a new supply. The moment you tilt your head to listen, the moment your heart opens in empathy, the moment you place them at the center, whether consciously or not, all of it becomes a golden invitation to an empty soul. Jung said the shadow recognizes the shadow before consciousness can intervene. This explains why narcissists know an empath fits them within minutes. Your shadow reflects precisely what they lack: the sensitivity they do not possess, the warmth they cannot generate, and the depth they will never be able to reach. But at the same time, That shadow carries an opening, a path straight into your most vulnerable core. The narcissist does not think, this person is wonderful. They think, this person will merge into me. This person will forgive me. This person will understand me even when I am wrong. This person can endure my chaos. That is not love, it is unconscious calculation. What draws them in is the rare blend of two extremes: warmth that soothes them and softness that convinces them they can dominate. For a narcissist, this is the perfect formula. Someone who makes them feel seen, someone who allows them to be the center, and someone whose shadow is soft enough not to resist strongly. That is why they recognize an empath instantly, as if the two souls met in another lifetime. But in truth, it is simply the meeting of two shadows, one shadow seeking healing, the other seeking a place to hide. Part 3. When the empath's light activates the narcissist's envy and shadow. Once the narcissist has recognized your soft shadow and entered your energy field, they begin to encounter something they were never prepared to face: your light. What they initially mistook as mere gentleness, empathy, and softness unexpectedly carries a form of strength they did not anticipate: authenticity. An empath does not only have darkness, they carry a kind of light born directly from that darkness, a natural awareness, unforced, undefensive, unpretentious. And it is precisely this authenticity that destabilizes the narcissist. To them, authenticity is not something beautiful, it is a quiet threat. It exposes the falseness of the persona they built. It reveals the weaknesses they work tirelessly to hide. It makes them feel not deep enough, not strong enough, not real enough. This is the moment the energy shifts from easy to control to being seen through. The narcissist lives in a state of self-disconnection. They do not see their own shadow, do not face their real wounds, do not touch their raw emotions. But the empath sees everything without trying. The empath's presence is like a mirror that cannot lie. When the narcissist smiles to hide their fear, the empath still sees the worry underneath. When the narcissist boasts, the empath senses the gap of insecurity. When the narcissist pretends to be strong, the empath hears the trembling in their energy. And this triggers the narcissist into a primitive defensive mode, what Jung called shadow panic, the terror that arises when the shadow is illuminated. This stage always contains a crucial turning point. Attraction turns into envy. The narcissist begins comparing your inner world with theirs, your sincerity with their manipulation, your self-possession with their dependency, the calm in your eyes with the chaos in their heart. And because they lack the capacity to admit this truth, the only reaction they can activate is envy. Not the kind of envy that says, I want what you have, but a destructive envy. If I can't have it, you are not allowed to keep it. This is the point where they start sabotaging your light through words, attitudes, coldness, disdain, psychological games designed to make you doubt your own worth. They do this not because you are wrong, but because you are right. Not because you are weak, but because you are strong. Not because you lack, but because you possess something they cannot manufacture. A soul that once shattered, yet still found its way back to light. This is also when they shift from idealization to control. Your light makes them simultaneously want to possess you and fear you, want to be close and want to destroy. The narcissist becomes pulled between two opposing forces. One drives them toward you to soothe their emptiness. The other pushes them to extinguish the light that makes them feel small. This creates an emotional dissonance. They attempt to relieve through subtle attacks, disappointing you to see if you will leave, hurting you to see if you will still love, wounding you to see if you will still forgive. Every reaction you give becomes fuel, reinforcing their sense of power. And what they envy the most is not your talent or beauty, it is your ability to remain who you are despite the pain you have endured. In their eyes, this is a supernatural strength. a strength they cannot copy, cannot imitate, cannot control. And the moment they realize this is the moment their shadow rises, not to beg for your light, but to destroy it in the only way they know, by diminishing your worth to inflate their ego. Yet deep in their unconscious, they know the truth. Your light is not something they can possess. It is proof that they themselves never truly grew up, and that is something their shadow cannot bear. Part 4. The hidden energy war, light and shadow collide. When envy in the narcissist has transformed into a deep instinctual force, the relationship between them and the empath enters an entirely different layer of interaction. No longer attraction, no longer idealization, but an invisible energy war where light and shadow are forced to confront each other. This is not a war of words or actions. It is a war of frequencies, of essence, of what two souls carry from the unhealed depths within them. Jung called this moment the confrontation with the shadow, the inevitable clash between the light of consciousness and the darkness of the unconscious. The irony is this: it is the narcissist who pulls the empath into this battle, yet they are the very ones unable to endure it. The empath does not enter this battle to win or to control. Their light has never been a weapon. It is simply presence. But through the narcissist's eyes, that presence becomes a threat. Because when light touches darkness, darkness never stays still. It must either dissolve or resist. And the narcissist chooses resistance. They begin inflicting subtle, energetic cuts, cold stares, demeaning comments, strategic blame, intentional silence, sudden distance, behaviors that make the empath feel as though they are slipping away from their own center. They do not realize that each act is not aimed at hurting you, but at protecting their fragile ego from the truth your energy forces them to face. In this phase, the empath begins to experience a delicate but profound exhaustion, not because they are weak, but because they are unconsciously absorbing both energies, their own light to remain themselves, and the darkness the narcissist projects onto them. Empaths are naturally energy decoders, so they automatically feel the chaos, the fear of abandonment, the emptiness, and the anger of the narcissist as if it were their own echo. This makes them believe that they must heal the other, save the other, be the strong enough light to hold the relationship together. But they do not know that this effort only prolongs and intensifies the energy war. For the narcissist, this stage is the state of shadow possession. When the shadow takes complete control, they become more two-faced, more unpredictable, more harsh, and simultaneously more dependent. They need the empath to feel alive, yet they hate that dependence. They need the empath's gentleness to soothe their inner chaos, yet they hate needing it. They need the empath's light to temporarily erase their emptiness, yet they fear that light will expose what they most want to hide. The relationship becomes a paradox. They stay out of need, but destroy out of shame. They need you like air, but rebel against that need. For the empath, a strange sensation begins to surface. No matter how much they try to heal, love, or understand, the energy within the relationship grows heavier. The brighter they become, the darker the relationship feels. The softer they are, the crueler the narcissist becomes. The more they give, the more the narcissist demands. This leads the empath into a spiral of self-doubt. What am I doing wrong? Am I not good enough? Should I love more? Am I the problem? But the truth is, the empath's light was never the problem. The problem is that the light shines exactly where the narcissist never wants to look. This is the stage where both souls stand at the threshold of revelation. The empath sees the narcissist's pain, and the narcissist sees the empath's light. But only one of them has the capacity to face it, and it is not the narcissist. Their shadow is too rigid, too thick, too accustomed to running. The empath, no matter how much it hurts, still has the ability to look directly at the truth. And in this war, it is truth, not love, that decides everything. Part 5. The awakening moment. When the empath sees the source of the frequency that attracts narcissists and decides to break the cycle. The most important turning point in the relationship between an empath and a narcissist does not come from the arguments, the apologies, or the promises to change. It comes from a silent, subtle, deeply spiritual moment. The moment the empath stops trying to save the other person and turns around to look directly at themselves, that is the moment the entire energy loop begins to crack. For a long time, the empath believes they were born to heal, to understand, to empathize, to carry some of other people's pain. They think their mission is to calm the inner war inside the narcissist. But as that war only escalates, the empath is finally forced to face a hard truth. What they are trying to heal is not the other person's wound, but their own wound reflected back through that person. The real victim of this loop is not the present-day empath, but the child within them, the child who was loved conditionally, who had to become the adult too early, who had to read every emotional storm in the family just to save themselves. It is that survival frequency, hypersensitivity, hyperendurance, hyperempathy, that becomes the guiding signal for narcissists. Narcissists do not actually seek empaths. They seek the emptiness, the wounds, and the need to prove worth inside the empath, things they can exploit, trap, and manipulate. When the empath realizes this, the entire story changes. Jung once said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." The moment of the empath's awakening is the moment they illuminate that unconscious part. They begin to understand that they do not attract narcissists because of their light, but because of their soft shadow, the shadow of endurance, of kindness without boundaries, of the fear of abandonment, of the belief that love must always come with suffering. And once this truth is clearly seen, the empath no longer stands in the position of the victim. They stand as the observer, the one who sees the mechanism, the laws, everything they once mistook for destiny. This awakening does not happen in a day. It comes after a long sequence of exhaustion that the soul can no longer bear. One day, the empath realizes they are shrinking, dimming, disappearing in their own life. One day, they realize that trying to save someone who does not want to change is just their way of repeating the past. One day, they understand that love is not about caring, not about unconditional self-erasure, not about erasing themselves to keep the peace, and that realization opens the first crack in the door that leads them out of the spiral. When the empath sees the truth, their energy changes. They begin to withdraw their attention, and this is what throws the narcissist into the deepest chaos. Narcissists are not afraid of losing a person. They are afraid of losing a mirror. When the empath withdraws their energy, what disappears is not just a person, but the mirror that once helped the narcissist feel real. The empath stops explaining, stops healing, stops trying to understand, stops straining their shoulders to be a refuge. And when they do this, something strange happens. The space they once used to hold other people's pain begins to return to them. This is the stage when many empaths think they are becoming worse, colder, more selfish. But in truth, they are learning a basic instinct they were never allowed to use before, the instinct of self-protection. The empath's awakening is like stepping out of a dream. At first, everything is blurry. Then it becomes clearer, then more painful, then fully awake. They look back at the relationship with the narcissist, and for the first time, they are not seeing with the eyes of a wounded heart, but with the eyes of a mature soul. They see the repeated pattern: idealization, dependency, control, sabotage, punishment, then return. They see how each behavior of the narcissist is tied to a wound inside them. And they understand that ending this relationship is not about leaving a person. It is about leaving a part of their own shadow, the part that accepted less than what they truly deserve. When perception changes, energy changes. And when energy changes, the loop ends. No shouting, no fights, no need to prove who is right or wrong. All it takes is a quiet, soul-level decision. I no longer have to live in the old story. From there, the empath begins to reclaim their light instead of letting it be wasted in places that cannot receive it. They learn to set boundaries as a sacred act. They learn to let loneliness heal them instead of pushing themselves into unsafe connections. They learn to see themselves as a soul returning home, not as a wound searching for rescue. This is the moment that makes all the difference. When the empath understands that their ability to attract narcissists was never destiny. It was a map guiding them back to their own shadow so they could step into a higher energetic maturity. And once they cross that threshold, the narcissist no longer has the power to shake them. Because once you have seen the shadow within yourself, you are no longer afraid of the shadow in others. Part 6. The narcissist's silent collapse when the empath awakens. When the empath awakens and withdraws their energy, a domino effect begins inside the narcissist that even they cannot comprehend. For a long time, they believed they were the center of your emotional solar system, that as long as they pulled away, you would chase. As long as they went silent, you would panic. As long as they frowned, you would self-correct. That as long as they withdrew love, you would try twice as hard to prove your worth. But now, when your withdrawal no longer comes from hurt, but from awareness, they feel something they were never prepared for, a loss of gravity. All the tactics they once used to keep you in orbit, punishing silence, strategic coldness, subtle blame, drip-feeding affection, suddenly stop working. They don't understand what is happening. They don't understand why this time you are not trembling, why you are not explaining, why you are not asking, are you okay? What did I do wrong? Can we talk? Your silence is no longer disappointment. It is awakening. And it is that state that begins their collapse. The narcissist does not just lose you. They lose the version of themselves you once sustained. They used to look into your eyes to feel important. They leaned on your understanding to feel special. They used your kindness to reinforce the illusion that they deserved unconditional love. When you step out of that role, they lose the borrowed ego they had deposited in you. This is what makes their collapse so quiet yet so profound. On the outside, they may still wear the mask of confidence, composure, even acting like someone who has moved on from the relationship. But inside, they enter what many analysts call the narcissistic void, the ego vacuum. Because only when your light is no longer reflecting back at them do they finally see the raw truth. There is nothing inside. No true identity. No intrinsic worth. No ability to regulate emotions. No inner anchor. Everything they once boasted about only existed in the presence of a witness. In your silence, they are forced to face themselves, the thing they fear the most. They are not used to looking into their own darkness, because their entire life they've escaped it by attaching themselves to someone else. When you step away, they lose their primary supply, your attention and emotional energy. They do not know how to self-regulate, so they fall into states of chaos, restlessness, insomnia, anxiety, random irritability, a sense of emptiness even while laughing, a sense of hollowness even while busy. They begin trying to recreate the lost feeling of power, seeking new supply, bragging excessively, posting suggestive status updates, telling victim stories, trying to make you jealous, or trying to prove you never mattered. But all of these attempts only further expose the truth their soul is trying to flee. They have lost the one thing they will never find again, the honest reflection that only an empath unconsciously provided. This is also the stage Jungian psychology calls shadow backlash. When the shadow no longer has anywhere to hide, it turns on the person who carries it. The narcissist is swept into a spiral of self-destruction. They blame you, yet crave you. They resent you, yet miss you. They want you to fail, yet secretly track your every move. They want to prove you're not special yet, cannot stop thinking about you. This obsession does not come from love. It comes from the fact that you were the last person who ever made them feel real. When you disappear, they are like an electrical wire, no longer grounded. Every emotion is amplified. Every insecurity becomes enormous. Every anger turns into a quiet inner storm. What hurts them the most is not that you left. It's that you left without needing them to change. You left without needing them to apologize. You left without needing to prove anything. You left not to hurt them, but to find yourself. And the fact that you found your true self becomes the clearest proof of their failure, that they never actually had the control over you they thought they did. No revenge wounds a narcissist more deeply than seeing the person they tried to destroy become stronger, brighter, and freer after their absence. The narcissist's collapse never happens in the spotlight. It happens in silence, in the shadow of their own being, where no one can see. But it is real, and it is the one thing they cannot hide from their own soul. In the end, the story between an empath and a narcissist has never truly been about strong versus weak, nor about who is right and who is wrong. It is an ancient ritual of the soul, where light is tested by darkness, and darkness is exposed by light. The narcissist enters the empath's life as a distorted mirror, reflecting back the parts the empath never dared to see: the childhood wounds, the fear of abandonment, the false beliefs about their own worth, the boundaries that were never built. And the empath enters the narcissist's life like a flare, illuminating the very emptiness they have been running from their entire life. The narcissist cannot bear that light, and the empath cannot save that darkness. Both are simply playing their roles in an agreement the unconscious made long ago. But unlike the narcissist, the empath has the capacity to awaken. When they see the shadow within and stop running from it, the loop ends. When they understand that kindness does not mean sacrificing the soul, that empathy does not mean enduring everything, that love does not mean erasing oneself, they step out of the old story as a soul newly reborn. And in that moment, everything changes. Their frequency changes, their energy changes, their boundaries change. They are no longer the one being pulled into other people's wounds. They become the one who chooses which souls are allowed to enter their life. Jung once said, "No one becomes enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." The empath has done exactly that. They have felt, they have hurt, they have shattered, they have fallen, but they have also risen, understood, matured, and returned to themselves. And when an empath returns to their true essence, when their light no longer comes from a need to be loved, but from a deep knowing of who they are, they step into an energetic realm the narcissist cannot touch, cannot drain, cannot destroy, and cannot follow. Because the real ending is never just leaving a person. The real ending is leaving the old version of yourself, the one who confused love with rescue, empathy with suffering, attachment with destiny. When the empath lets go of that version, they step into the freedom they were meant to have all along. And in that freedom, they finally grasp something they could never reach before: that their light was never born to soothe someone else's darkness, but to light the way for themselves and for the souls brave enough to walk that path beside them. This is the true victory. This is the true liberation. This is where the old story ends and their sovereign journey begins.